we will try to move this along quickly because we have a lot of members who asked for the opportunity to testify and to bring to the attention of the panel, which is composed mostly but not exclusively of chief deputy whips who are the chief deputies in the whip organization. So good afternoon, witnesses. Thank you very much for being here. I'm pleased to call this hearing to order and welcome all of you to what will be the first in a series of hearings for the question, Make It in America. Next. Ago, at a time when our nation was still working to recover from the Great Recession, House Democrats introduced a jobs plan that has focused on creating jobs and making our private sector more competitive for the 21st century global economy. We've had a number of important successes, including the enactment of 16 pieces of Make It in America legislation, including reauthorization of the Competes Act, in 2011, passage of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, and legislation to help clear the patent application backlog and reform the filing process for innovators. Having achieved significant economic recovery gains, we must now ask ourselves how best to adapt the Make It in America plan to one that will help us address the new economic challenges we face and lay the groundwork for growth and prosperity for the future. These hearings will provide an opportunity for members. We have established this hearing process so that members of the Democratic Caucus can give us their ideas and their recommendations, to hear from one another, from employers, from workers, from innovators, from entrepreneurs, and from economists and other experts about what they believe families and businesses need in order to make it in America today. Over the next several months, we'll be revamping the Make It in America plan so that it better reflects the needs of our economy in 2015 and beyond, to help create good jobs and ensure that both businesses and workers have the tools necessary to compete and succeed in a global marketplace. Part of this is recognizing that Make It in America is about more than traditional manufacturing. With new technologies and new ways to connect Americans with economic opportunity, our plans must address a wider range of issues in order to achieve our most fundamental goal, making sure that everyone who works hard and takes responsibility can, in fact, make it in America. I look forward to hearing from our colleagues at this first hearing about the ways the Make It in America plan can be adapted and expanded to help their constituents achieve that goal. I'm now pleased to welcome our first of four panels today, this panel focuses on American innovation. Testifying as part of this first panel will be Mr. Butterfield Mr. Butterfield will be here. He is currently participating in a press conference with reference to the matter that I mentioned at the outset of these hearings, the Confederate battle flag and its use and display. Representative Jared Polis of Colorado, Representative Bill Foster of Illinois, Representative Susan Delbaney of Washington State, and Representative Mark Takano. I want to thank them very much for their testimony on American innovation. All of them have insights that we believe will be important to the Congress and to all of us. So now, first, let me recognize Mr. Polis, and we'll go from right to left, my right to your left. Mr. Polis, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to talk about the sharing economy and its importance to the Make It in America program. Collaboration is the foundation of our 21st century economy, and new technology presents more opportunities than ever before for people to exchange information on a peer-to-peer basis, exchange resources and capital in the blink of an eye. Startups are no longer just about a small group of people huddling together to pool their ideas and resources. They're about crowdsourcing ideas and investment opportunities. They're about collaborating to develop source code and take advantage of open source technology, and about protecting the resources that all businesses and economies depend on to grow, whether they're natural resources like air and water, or technological resources like the internet and wireless spectrum, or unused capacity like the spare bedroom in your home. Public policy must catch up to the needs of 21st century innovators, and we need to make sure that outdated legacy government policies do not stifle innovation or disruption. We should be promoting collaboration and eliminating legacy barriers to entry so that anyone with a good idea can have an opportunity to compete with big corporations that far too often monopolize the marketplace. Our broken immigration system is one challenge facing new businesses. An immigration system that does not train and retain talented individuals that want to build a business in America fails both our entrepreneurs and our economy. We want the next great companies to be founded here on our shores rather than overseas. Comprehensive immigration reform is one of the most important steps Congress can take if we're serious about growing our economy here at home. Maintaining the free and open internet, because the internet is the lifeblood of the 21st century economy. The next big company of tomorrow depends on a free and open internet, which is under attack by some here in Congress who are trying to prevent the FCC from implementing rules designed to keep the internet free and open. Free expression is essential to global commerce, as is the integrity of the internet ecosystem. We need to address surveillance, because our own government's overzealous surveillance program has already done significant damage to trust and credibility, has led to data being stored overseas with foreign corporations instead of here at home, and has hurt the trust in the internet ecosystem, which has been such a dynamic vehicle for growth. We need to empower capital formation, make sure that we have a positive investment ecosystem with essential elements, including favorable tax treatment of R&D and investment infrastructure, and pass laws that empower capital formation like the Crowdfunding Act, which was part of the Jobs Act that passed this body. Finally, we need to make sure that everybody benefits from the sharing economy and the new internet economy. We need to make sure that collective bargaining is expanded to decrease wage disparity, and that we can welcome more families to the middle class through the increased opportunity. In conclusion, it's Congress's job to do everything possible to foster an environment where good ideas can thrive and more American families can live the American dream. There is much Congress can and must do to nurture America's tradition of innovation and opportunity.
Someone who has been involved in the innovation economy very successfully. We appreciate your testimony. Now, what I think would be best to do, in case some of you have schedule problems, I want to go through all the witnesses first, and if you can stay, we'd like to propound questions. Mr. Foster.
Well, thank you,
Congressman
Mr.
Foster,
Chairman, for
Illinois.
convening this panel and for the opportunity to testify today. Highlighting the need to make it in America is very important to the success and welfare of America's middle class, and it's important to me. Before having the privilege of representing the 11th Congressional District of Illinois, I was a scientist, and before that, I was a businessman. When I was 19 years old, my brother and I founded a company to manufacture microprocessor-based theater lighting controls. That company now manufactures over half of the theater lighting equipment in the United States. My brother is still the chief executive officer, and the company has built and maintained its manufacturing facilities in the Midwest, supporting hundreds of good-paying jobs. We build electronic hardware, software, sheet metal, painting, project management, and customer support, and we've kept all of those jobs in the United States. Growing the pie means that the creation of new things, the demand for new capital, and the jobs to meet these needs. Not all invention and innovation happens in large, highly funded laboratories or research and development facilities. The business my brother and I founded began its life in my parents' basement with a $500 investment. I, like many other inventors of my generation, started out by taking apart lawnmowers, radios, televisions, and putting them back together in new and creative configurations. However, the children today are not able to take apart a smartphone and intuitively figure out how it works because so much of the engineering is done in the microcircuits and in the software. So we need new ways to foster that interest in learning how things work and how to build them better. Doing so will serve as a way to get kids interested in the STEM fields and to lay the foundation for a bright future. To help accomplish this, I've introduced H.R. 1622, the National Fab Lab Network Act. A Fab Lab is a set of digitally controlled machine tools that enable you to build just about anything. These are tools of modern manufacturing: 3D printers, laser cutters, routers, computer-aided design tools. They can be used to build anything: a bracelet, a machine part, or even a fully functioning computer. My bill would create a federal charter for a nonprofit organization called the National Fab Lab Network. Additional network Fab Labs would give children access to the tools and the guidance they need to build things. For a child, turning something that they can imagine into something they can hold in their hands is a powerful experience. It changes the way they think of themselves. I make things becomes part of their identity. For our nation to prosper and our economy to grow, America needs makers. Fab Labs would also help our nation's existing makers by enabling them to rapidly prototype their idea. Small businesses start with an idea, and Fab Labs give entrepreneurs the tools they need to turn their ideas into realities. Too often, this is the stage when a would-be businessman or businesswoman and inventor just can't get past. Fab Labs democratize and spread the means to innovate and produce real-world products, designed, created, and produced right here in the United States. From the local to the national scale, invention and innovation drive economic growth. The Congress is positioned to provide the investment and create the environment to drive and to nurture the next great idea. Again, I thank Mr. Hoyer for highlighting the need and the opportunity we have to advance American manufacturing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Foster. We're all in awe of your early enterprise and success and knowledge, and we thank you for testifying today. Next, Susan Delbaney of Washington State, who herself was an extraordinarily accomplished businesswoman for a small startup corporation called Microsoft. Congresswoman Delbaney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for pulling together this panel. As someone who represents a hub of science and technological innovation and who had a career in the tech industry before coming to Congress, I'm no stranger to the importance of a thriving innovation economy. But today I'd like to urge my colleagues to think bigger and more broadly about what that really means. When we talk about building a strong manufacturing sector in the U.S., technology must be part of the conversation. The United States has been at the forefront of groundbreaking technological advances. And we can maintain that leadership, but we need to make sure that our infrastructure and our workforce are equipped for an increasingly technology-dependent world. The line between technology and non-technology, or what others refer to as software and hardware sectors, it's diminishing as the demand for software-driven and internet-connected products grows at lightning speed. We're entering a new era of connected devices called the Internet of Things that holds transformative promise for our economy and the way we live, work, and play. Our homes, cities, and even our risks will be connected in unprecedented ways. This means that the people designing these products will need to understand how to produce technologically complex products that interact with other products. And it will also mean that we need to understand how to handle and protect the communications and vast amounts of data that will come from these products. Traditionally, technology has been thought of as a nice-to-have, but it's increasingly a must-have, a basic part of an organization's infrastructure. Investing in that infrastructure is not only a smart thing to do that will yield great returns, but it's critical to maintaining security and protecting privacy and intellectual property. And it isn't just internal to an organization. From laying fiber to making sure every community in America has meaningful web access, to securing government and private sector networks, and equipping our cities and towns with life and money-saving technologies, investments in our technological infrastructure help build the foundation for a strong economy. At the same time, we need to train our students and workers for 21st century careers. That means developing a plan to ensure that our workers have the tools they need to drive the next generation of innovation in this country. We should be including computer programming or coding into every school curriculum. We need to encourage creativity and innovation, emphasizing not just STEM education, but STEAM, science, technology, education, engineering, arts, and mathematics. And we need to support those already in the workforce to pick up skills that will allow them to adapt to rapid changes in technology. If we want to continue to make it in America, we must support innovation, invest in 21st century technology infrastructure, and educate our workforce for the jobs of tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much for that testimony. Very helpful and very insightful. Next, from California, Mr. Mark Tucano. Mark, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing, and I'm very honored to be here. As we all know, the last few decades have seen a steep decrease in domestic manufacturing. Analysts became resigned to the idea that labor costs in Asia and Mexico would never allow us to be competitive, and that we needed to shift the fundamentals of our economy to reflect this. We shut down factories, focused on the creation of vast supply networks, and began retraining our students to look for jobs outside of factories. However, some of these fundamentals of manufacturing are changing, and with this, we have an opportunity. The changes are being driven by advancements in technology, increased access to new forms of capital, an easier transition from idea to prototype, changes in consumer purchasing patterns, and a direct line to sell to those consumers through the internet. An example I'll share is of Anton Willis, an avid kayaker who, after moving into a San Francisco apartment, he had no place to keep his kayak. So he brainstormed a solution to build a folding kayak out of corrugated plastic that would fit in his closet. Now, that idea has become a successful business known as Oru Kayaks, which are designed and manufactured in my home state of California. Their website boasts, quote, we're proud to be part of a new wave of American manufacturing focused on quality, flexibility, and continuous innovation. We believe in American workers, American suppliers, and American quality. Along the way from idea to business, he used a variety of tools now available to the American innovator. Much has been talked about by my colleague, Mr. Foster. The first step required him to create a prototype. And since his apartment wasn't large enough to hold a kayak, it also wasn't large enough to hold the tools he needed to create one of the 20 full-scale prototypes he initially put together. However, Anton was a member of a makerspace in San Francisco, sometimes also known as Fab Labs. And while we also associate garage workshops with early inventors like the home computing clubs that led to the PC revolution, this new generation of innovators have set up shops in large warehouses or makerspaces that operate on a gym membership type business model. For an average of $100 a month, members receive access to millions of dollars worth of advanced manufacturing equipment. Once members are trained, they can use that equipment for any type of project they want to pursue. Now, Anton's team worked on dozens of small paper prototypes before they began the process of fabricating their full-size prototype. They worked with a number of traditional shop tools for fabricating in metal and plastic, and then they added more advanced tools and computer numerical control machines, also known as CNC. Thankfully, the cost of these machines and the technical knowledge needed to use them have dropped in the last few years. Now, once he had a solid prototype, he needed to scale up production and to take it to market, which meant he needed capital. He used a popular crowdsourcing website, Kickstarter, to raise money from future consumers, rather than having to pitch his idea to investors that might not see his vision or have shared his experience as a kayaker looking for a solution to a common problem. His initial goal was $80,000, but he quickly blew past that and raised $443,000. This is the story of one business, but this is happening across the country. Consumers are demanding higher quality goods that provide a more personal experience, and artisans, makers, and small-scale producers are better equipped to handle that demand than our international competitors. They're better equipped to locate demand in their community or online. They're able to learn the skills and access the tools needed to prototype their ideas at maker spaces. They can raise money through crowdsourcing, and they can take their products to market through sites such as eBay and Etsy. But a gap still remains. That gap is how to scale up production thoughtfully and sustainably without moving their production operations overseas. And here lies the great opportunity. Manufacturing is not as dirty, loud, or dangerous as it was a generation ago. And small batch manufacturing can actually act as an anchor in the redevelopment of a neighborhood, in the same way that bringing in retail has been for decades. There are small businesses that are locally owned and produce tangible goods for other businesses or for consumers. What they need, and often don't have, is the proper space to set up shop. Their operations are generally much smaller than traditional factories and often less than 2,000 square feet. And they can run into zoning and technical problems with buildings not intended to be used that way. Manufacturing in residential areas has a series of added benefits. Your employees can live nearby, and it's easy to add a retail component to your location. By adding in tours, events, and workshops, you are strengthening your brand, attracting local audience to your product, and turning your neighborhood into a destination. As legislators, we can visit and support our local makerspaces or sponsor legislation such as my colleague, Mr. Foster. We can push to make crowdsourcing rules simpler while ensuring strong oversight and consumer protections, and we can incentivize local zoning and development of small batch manufacturing as part of redevelopment plans. If we as policymakers can come together and be supportive, this may be the catalyst that brings manufacturing back to America. Yes, Mr. Chairman, we can make it in America.
Well said. I'm going to yield to Congresswoman Chu as she has a question for Mr. Polis.
Yes, I'd like to ask Representative Polis, you've worked so closely with so many startup companies that are trying to enter the marketplace and need the capital to do so. Would you share an example of some of the more innovative ways of accessing the capital that is working for these entrepreneurs?
Absolutely. Crowdfunding or empowering individual investors to invest in tomorrow's great American company has proven to be a great way for the initial round of capital to be raised, particularly when an entrepreneur might not come from a wealthy family or have wealthy friends or family members that can invest in their startup. It allows them to turn to their friends and neighbors in $50 or $100 increments, and whether it means putting together enough money to open a store or a restaurant or to start a tech company, it's empowering entrepreneurs across our country. There's been several states that have passed, including my home state of Colorado, which have signed into law additional steps building upon what we accomplished through the Jobs Act here as well. I think there's also opportunities to remove any barriers that exist on the tax side and the liability side to encourage the very type of risk-taking and investment that can lead to tomorrow's great company being built right here in America.
Terrific answer. Thank you very much. I'll yield to Mr. Castro, who has, I know, a question for Mr. Foster.
Yeah, Congressman Foster, first I want to commend you on your idea for the Fab Labs, and it sounds very much like a manufacturing playground so that people can pick up these habits and develop building skills. Do you have a sense for what it would cost an individual if they were trying to assemble all these tools?
The bare machinery is between $100,000 and $200,000, and that's only part of the investment you need. It depends. For example, some of these are located in the basement of a library, for example, where you don't have to buy the building and you have someone present to turn on and off the lights. In that case, the initial investment is slightly above $200,000, including the spare supplies and stuff, to support a large number of users. An individual would not have to buy as much stock of material to go into products because he or she would have a specific idea of what they want to build. But it is the very first of the Fab Labs was put in a storefront. It was an outreach effort by MIT into a less wealthy area of Boston, and they put it in a storefront in a not very wealthy area. And so it had a group of volunteers that sort of assembled around it. Very often you find retired machinists whose hearts ache that the next generation isn't building stuff, and they are thrilled to be volunteers to go and teach young kids how to actually build stuff. And so each Fab Lab gets a sort of uniqueness around it based on its volunteer base. But they have standardized machinery, so anything you design and build at one Fab Lab can be downloaded and designed and built at any of the other more than 100 Fab Labs throughout the United States.
Thank you very much. Yield to Mr. Welch from Vermont, Chief Deputy Whip.
Thank you, and I have a question, a couple of questions for Congresswoman Del Bene. I'm from a rural state with some urban pockets, and the internet is so critical to Vermonters, both in the urban areas, but especially in rural areas who want to have a business that can burgeon into something big. And you mentioned investing in the infrastructure, and I want you to elaborate on that. And there's two aspects to my question for you. One is, we saw yesterday 3 breakdowns in the New York Stock Exchange, United Airlines, and Wall Street Journal. And I don't know, I guess we don't know what the cause was, but I don't know if there's an infrastructure issue there. And then the second part of it is in rural America, we've got to get the internet built out. And when we talk about roads and when we talk about infrastructure, we're often talking about roads and bridges, but I'm very interested in your comment about the need to invest in the infrastructure for the internet, which in rural or urban America for safety, security, and job creation is very important. So could you just elaborate on that?
Absolutely. It's a great question, and I do think it's very similar to talking about roads and bridges, and that so much of our economy and the way people communicate is based on technology, and if an email system goes down and people aren't able to communicate, or even folks who are communicating via their cellular network, that infrastructure is critical. And we know now, the examples you just gave of things that happened yesterday in terms of technology issues that caused the New York Stock Exchange to go down, or for United Airlines to cancel flights and delay flights. The reason our infrastructure is so critical is because people are dependent on it, and so many of our operations are dependent on it. Yet, for a long time, we've only funded it as if it was kind of a nice-to-have. IT
Right.
parts of organizations were not the first thing that an organization thought of, and as a result, we end up with, in many cases, out-of-date technology infrastructure. If you look at government use of technology, in many cases very out of date, even in many cases the way we use technology in the House of Representatives. And so realizing that we need to keep that up to date, not only because of the efficiency and strength of the system, but also because of the security of that system is critical. And more as we see attacks on systems, keeping them up to date and as secure as possible is going to be extremely critical. And then quickly to your comment on rural areas, I mean, this is an incredible opportunity. One, we need to make sure we have broadband access out to those rural areas so that people are able to engage in technology and internet-based economy. But it's also a huge opportunity because with that connection, you can do so many things. You don't necessarily have to be physically located in an urban area. And in fact, in some areas of manufacturing, we have manufacturing facilities outside of urban areas, and that technology infrastructure allows them to work not only locally, but in many cases around the world.
Thank you. And I'll now yield to Mr. Norcross for a question for Mr. Takano.
Thank you, Congressman. First of all, appreciate you being here today, and I love the idea of these maker spaces, the idea of taking the old garage and putting it on steroids. But the question comes, is the challenges that you face when you're trying to put those garages together, or the spaces. Obviously zoning laws and things of that, but there's privacy issues, legal issues bringing in the market. Can you talk about some of those challenges in addition to the space?
Well, right now I think we as members of Congress and policymakers have to just kind of watch what's happening in the movement, allow it to emerge. There's a lot of energy in this movement. It's about 10, 15 years old. If you just type in maker movement or maker space, you can tap into a whole online community. People who like to watch YouTube videos and learn how to make things. And they often find they don't have the tools to make them. And then if there's a maker space that happens to be in the community, they can make these things. Inevitably, we will run into copyright issues and all sorts of legal issues, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But what I'm excited about as a former teacher is seeing that this is a way for us to reconnect schools to things like metalworking, welding, and bring shop back into the school in a meaningful new way. I want to just say to you that I'm very proud of the Obama White House. They have They're very much on top of this in the Department of Education. The technology people have been trying to coordinate activities with education leaders across the country. The National Endowment for the Arts is focusing on grants with this maker technology at the point of where the technology intersects with design. The Institute for Museum and Library Sciences is helping libraries reinvent themselves, being the places where they were the points of democratizing information, books, to democratizing access to technology and advanced manufacturing materials. So I'm very excited.
I want to thank all of you for being here. I want to also point out to our audience, many of whom are very much involved in some of the Making It in America enterprises that you have talked about. But this is somewhat, we have panelists of members, and we have members who are listening to you. It is, however, a wonderful example of the diversity of the members of our House and the extraordinary experiences and knowledge they bring to the legislative process as we think, as Abraham Lincoln once said, as our problems are new, we must think anew and act anew. And I think that's all of you have been talking about exactly that as we face new technologies and new opportunities. So we thank you very, very much for being with us. Now, we're moving along, I know, pretty quickly because we have 4 panels. We've got to be here at 4 o'clock. Next, I'd like to invite Brian Higgins of New York, who is sitting here with us, Representative Tim Walz of Minnesota, Representative Jim Himes of Connecticut, Representative Suzanne Bonamici of Oregon, and Representative Don Norquist. Now, I think there are only 4 chairs there. Perhaps we can either squeeze in a 5th or, let's see if we can squeeze in, Jim, let's see if we can squeeze in a 5th chair there. This panel has been asked to discuss
So Congress should reauthorize the Carl D. Perkins Career and Technical Education Act with a goal of having CTE programs keep pace with corresponding careers. One of the barriers is equipment. A recent survey found that CTE instructors found that 80% of them needed new classroom equipment, so we should work on that issue as well. In addition to helping classrooms get modern equipment, reauthorization of the new CTE law should prepare instructors to provide curriculum that's relevant. That means this Perkins Act should also support professional development. And of course, some of the most effective examples of industries partnering on career and technical education programs are where companies become active in the student education. In Oregon, a number of universities have partnered with leading companies like Boeing, Intel, Genentech, and Georgia Pacific to develop the Multiple Engineering Cooperative Program. That was established back in the late 70s. It places engineering students in credit-bearing internships, and the universities and companies share responsibility for preparing students for the workforce. So as Congress continues to support the development of diverse and innovative workforce through quality secondary and post-secondary programs, we must remember that ultimately skills training programs rely on adaptability, just like the economy they support. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Congresswoman, as a matter of fact, adaptability to new challenges and opportunities is what this hearing is all about, so you really put the key on it. Mr. Himes of Connecticut.
Thank you, Mr. Whip. Really appreciate you pulling together these hearings, and it's a privilege to participate. One of the reasons this is so important is the economy has changed absolutely dramatically in the last 50 years. I'm just old enough to remember a time when in American cities and in American towns, a high school educated individual who worked hard would walk down to the factory, get a job on a factory floor with hundreds of skilled and semi-skilled and unskilled employees, and have the opportunity to live a middle-class life. Those days are gone. Globalization plus technology have radically changed what a factory floor looks like and what our economy looks like. I recently, a couple of weeks ago, had the opportunity to tour a 2.5-mile assembly line at the BMW factory in Munich, Germany, and I was stunned by the fact that the 45 minutes of walking through this assembly line, the first 45 minutes, I saw about 10 or 11 people tending the robots that were assembling this very well-engineered automobile. It was nothing short of stunning. The tour that I took should raise the eyebrows of anyone concerned with our place in the global economy. The good news is this automation has changed the balance of jobs at BMW, not eliminated them. There's more people working today at BMW than ever before, but they're doing very different and very much higher value-added jobs than they would have been doing 30 years ago. Instead of row upon row of welders, there are offices full of programmers, marketers, people thinking about global strategy. The jobs are still there, but they require drastically different skills in the 21st century than they did in the 20th. Thankfully, the solution to the problem is right in front of us. We need to dedicate the necessary resources to make sure that our young people are trained for the jobs that exist today and to retrain those workers whose jobs have been left behind by this kind of change. This starts in elementary education and high school with an increased emphasis on the STEM knowledge that today's jobs require and continues well into higher education, which is no longer optional. It is mandatory if one is to be in the middle class. Not just in traditional four-year colleges, of course, but in community colleges and trade schools as well. In my own district, Housatonic Community College is an institution preparing its students for the 21st century workforce. It has a program called Advanced Manufacturing, where it is training students in jobs that are non-exportable, such as computer information technology, healthcare workers, and medical assistant jobs, where jobs usually start at around $50,000 a year. Those skilled workers are desperately needed. A few years ago, I visited a subcontractor to Sikorsky, which is an important company in Connecticut. This subcontractor was called Jim Ippolito and Company. They're a precision manufacturer in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and I talked to them about the challenges and opportunities they were facing. At Jim Ippolito, they had jobs that were going begging. At the time I visited, it was 9 or 10 jobs. This is a small shop where the management couldn't find the people trained in the computerized CNC, computerized lathing technology that this company needed to be a good subcontractor to one of our defense manufacturers. That's why education and job training are so vital. The path forward is clear. We can't undo technological advances or refuse to participate in the global marketplace. Instead, we must help our workers by providing the education and the skills that are necessary to provide the security to American families. Thank you, Mr. Whip. It's a pleasure to testify. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. We have a theme here, and it's an important theme for us to know that we look at change as perhaps a challenge, but it is really an opportunity, and that's what you cite when the German example at BMW. Let me now go to Mr. Walls, Tim Walls of Minnesota. Thank you, Tim.
Well, I thank the whip, and the gentleman from Maryland has been a champion on this very issue, and this is a hearing exactly what the folks in Minnesota and southern Minnesota want us to be talking about. I'm blessed to represent an area that CNBC just recognized as the top state to do business in. My district is hovering around 3% unemployment. We have a diversified economy, from a large agricultural base to the Mayo Clinic and other medical innovations, but also the third leg of that economic stool is manufacturing. We have hundreds of large and small manufacturing, places like Fastenal or Winona Canoes. We have AGCO in Jackson building heavy farm equipment and tractors. Halcon, a high-end furniture manufacturer, and places like Angie's Kettle Corn that has blossomed out of a garage small business and become the nation's leading producer of specialty popcorns. And when I go throughout this district, the one thing is that the owners and the workers tell me we can compete against anybody. We'll outproduce them. We'll make better products. And now we're starting to see parity with China on that cost. The one thing they tell me is they can't find enough workers. Now, this is a good problem to have, you may think, but it doesn't change the bottom line, that expansion is being stopped because we don't have the workforce. We don't have the trained workforce. You heard it from my colleagues here talking about career and technical advances. And I'm here as a representative of those companies, but also as a teacher and a father of 2 young children thinking about the future. It's time for us in this country to have this conversation. Manufacturing and Make It in America is coming back. We need to get ready for that. We need to have the conversations with our children about the noble professions that are out there that you hear my colleagues talking about, that opportunity to walk down and get it in a high-tech factory, and it may not, as the gentleman from Mr. Himes said, may not look like the dirty factory with sparks flying that you would see, but we're still manufacturing lots of things. We're still doing what we need to do to build this country and to provide those middle-class jobs. And I would suggest this career and technical, we need to rethink, starting in high school, starting with the parents, starting with what are we doing to ensure that skill set is there. Plasma welders are in high demand in my district. That's something that we could be doing in high schools, adding value added. The community college mechatronics and some of the things they're doing could add to it. We've got high school kids 3D printing and no CAD drafting as well as anyone. We can start thinking about how we do our education, the pre-K to whenever we get them hired. And I would suggest the optimism that's out there, the country is ready for this. They're ready to see this happen. They're ready to, when we hear of the excessive student loan debt, we see some of those types of things. We need to look at a broader approach to it, that it's coming back. And I would say as a corollary to this, or something we also need to think about, and I know that the gentleman, Mr. Hoyer, has thought about this, one of the issues we have now too is affordable workforce housing that goes hand in hand with this. I've got cities that are literally at 100% capacity. They cannot add anyone else. The city of Rochester and the Mayo Clinic, 35,000 people work at the Mayo Clinic in a town of 100,000. They are going to add 10,000 jobs by the end of this decade. That city is going to double in size with a $6 billion investment that's now being made there. We're going to need housing because they're at 1% availability right now. So the gentleman is doing the important work of bringing these issues up. You heard from some great entrepreneurs and folks speaking in the previous panel. You have folks that are thinking about how we get this in. My message that I would convey from those entrepreneurs and those CEOs out there is let's start thinking about providing the quality to those students, those Americans that are ready to work there. Let us have them then. We'll build it in America. We'll make it in America, and we will compete against anyone. Just give us that base. I yield back.
Absolutely. I share the gentleman's passion and optimism, and so I thank him for coming with us. Now I want to yield to Brian Higgins from New York.
I thank the chair and thank Mr. Hoyer for holding this important hearing and for his strong, decisive leadership on this issue. Over the past 5 years, our country has slowly recovered from the worst economic recession since the Great Depression. and at long last, American families are beginning to feel return to normalcy. Since Congress stepped in to help General Motors and Chrysler through bankruptcy in 2009, the auto industry has added 600,000 jobs, including the creation and retention of over 700 jobs in my community at the GM plant in Tonawanda, New York. And the larger economy has added private sector jobs for the past 63 months in a row, the longest streak on record. Over the past 5 years, we've added 12.6 million jobs, nearly 900,000 of which have been manufacturing sector. We are seeing the largest resurgence in domestic manufacturing in decades, and the rising costs overseas encourage U.S. companies to move factory production not out of the United States, but back to the United States. Although the economy is in far better shape than it was in 2009, we still have a long way to go. There are steps the federal government can and should take to promote job growth, especially in the manufacturing industry. I'd like to respectfully offer my thoughts on how Make It in America agenda under the leadership of Mr. Hoyer and House Democrats can expand our economy. I'd like to draw on my experience from Buffalo, New York. For decades, our community suffered from a weak and vulnerable economy, but today we're seeing construction cranes all over downtown Buffalo. Jobs are being created, and Buffalo is regaining the confidence it once had, but lost. The most obvious lesson is the resurgence of Buffalo's waterfront. 10 years ago, we won a $300 million federal relicensing settlement from the New York Power Authority. We dedicated that funding to infrastructure, and it is currently financing the transformation of Buffalo's waterfront from an old, inaccessible industrial area to a place of new and exciting opportunities, creating lots of jobs and hundreds of millions of dollars in private sector investment. Our example of an economic power of infrastructure couldn't be clearer, but in Washington, Congress is not paying attention. Congress authorized just $50 billion for our roads and bridges, and despite the common misconception, only 8% of the $64 billion of 2009 economic stimulus went to infrastructure. We spent $89 billion rebuilding the roads and bridges of Afghanistan. We spent $73 billion rebuilding the roads and bridges of Iraq, and for what? It's time that we do nation building right here at home, and the backbone of that policy is the Make It in America policies advanced by this Congress and our and Leader Hoyer. Salaries in the construction trades average over $70,000 a year, and these jobs cannot be outsourced. I suggest that the Make It in America agenda should encourage Congress to enact a much more robust infrastructure bill this year than the timid approach currently under consideration. The second lesson we've learned in Western New York is that investments in environment and energy can lead to creation of manufacturing jobs. We have a plant. I grew up in the shadows of Republic in Bethlehem Steel in Buffalo in Western New York. Those plants closed up in 1983. But Solar City is under construction today, building on that site the largest solar manufacturing for panels in the entire Western Hemisphere. It'll create over 3,500 jobs and new investment in an area that has been economically in decline for so long. It will produce 1 gigawatt of annual solar capacity, and as I mentioned, will create over 3,500 jobs. So what we're seeing is from what was once a depressing reminder of former industrial activity to a new exciting environment based on investments. The third component of the Make It in America agenda should include job training. Employment in the domestic solar industry will grow by 20% this year. In Western New York, Erie Community College has seized this opportunity to develop a clean energy curriculum program to meet growing employment needs. Students at Erie Community College learn how to size and install solar energy systems, connect electricity to the grid, and interpret and comply with local building codes. Just as manufacturing businesses compete with companies on every continent, their employees compete with workers all over the world. In this new global environment, it is essential that American workers develop the skills to keep them ahead of the competition. And because technologies change and industries adapt, our workers need sustained continuing education over the course of their careers to keep a competitive edge. So with that, I just want to close by thanking the chairman, Mr. Hoyer, for taking this initiative, for advancing the kinds of things that will be necessary to grow the American economy. Thank you.
Now, Mr. Norcross from New Jersey. Don Norcross.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate you putting this panel together, and certainly it's something that's extremely relevant today. And listening to the previous speakers, I want to echo the more non-traditional, the community college education, which I look at as the most affordable, quality, flexible education, higher education that's available today. It gives those who are coming out of school or high school the ability to have choices that are beyond the traditional four-year institution and the price tag that goes with that. When we look at the community college education today, it gives the person, first of all, affordable. Generally speaking, 60% less than a four-year private institution. Flexible because it doesn't take always the 13th grade, as they used to refer to it. Gives the person the ability to look beyond what they thought they wanted to do and give them the ability to have flexible spending of what their life would be like. One size doesn't fit all for those coming out of school. I know we hear day in and day out that most parents, you have to go to college. To make it in America, you have to go to college. Well, I'm here today to say you don't have to go to college. In fact, we need to emphasize those other crafts that keep our world running. You need the electricians, you need the carpenters, or it doesn't work. And today, that ability going through a community college and the apprenticeship programs is something that we need to emphasize much more. We came off of probably the last 6 years, the worst economic times in the construction industry in my lifetime. But what we have is a resurgence of that. The Building Trades of America, there are 15 craft unions that spend $1.9 billion a year in 1,900 classrooms across this great country. If it were a K-12, it'd be the fourth largest school system in this country. We have it there. It's available. We need to use it. But that only happens when work is available. So as work slows down, those opportunities to take advantage of that school also slows down. So when we look into the future, making sure that the college education system is flexible, working through the community college, which gives credit for those serving in apprenticeship programs, and certainly moving on, because as we heard earlier, the average wage of the construction is $70,000 plus. And I think that is just so important. Instead of coming out of debt of $250,000, you go into an apprenticeship program through the community college and the private trades and come out owing nothing and starting your future without debt. I think it's extremely important because I sit here today as coming through one of those non-traditional means. I'm an electrician with a tie who happens to have made it here to the halls of Congress. I want to say thank you to the chair for putting this together, to making sure that making it in America is something that we need to be proud of, no matter what shape or size we come through. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Congressman. I think Congressman Norcross is a really shining example of if you have talent, you apply that talent, you can be successful and make it in America. And I think personally that we need to focus on alternative ways to be skillful and to be economically advantaged. A senior welder in America can make six-figure incomes, over $100,000. Senior electrician can do the same. Skills training, which has been the subject matter of this panel, critically important. Now let me yield first to Mr. Welch, who has a question of Mr. Himes.
Mr. Himes, actually, I thought your testimony, Mr. Norcross's testimony, really focused on the need for some kind of training to get us into these jobs. And you and I were at a meeting with the New England delegation where I think Deloitte was presenting information about 18,000 jobs in New England with nobody to take them. So one of the, which obviously just is heartbreaking. There's work to be done. Folks need jobs and we can't fill them. In your outline of the training, the community colleges, you know, the apprenticeship programs, the role that the private sector can play where they need to do some training, how do you see the balance of effort between the public sector providing these training opportunities, the private sector And then also some acknowledgement of the trades that have these apprenticeship programs that are quite expensive for the trades. And I'm wondering if you could just elaborate, because it doesn't seem like we have a mechanism with a financial model that can provide some assurance that a person will get that training they need to be matched up, in our case in New England, with one of those 18,000 jobs.
Yeah, I thank my friend from Vermont for the question. I think it's a great question with a whole bunch of answers. Let me give the one that was most obvious to me as I was talking to the subcontractor I referred to. We have a long way to go in creating a feedback loop where, you asked about the private sector, where companies big and small, Boeing down to my friends at Jim Ippolito, actually have a way to inform our community colleges, our universities, who's steering VOTEC programs, the few VOTEC programs that still exist in this country. It's boards of education at the municipal level and at the state level. And there is no feedback loop for Boeing and Jim Ippolito to tell those mechanisms in state houses or on boards of eds or frankly in this institution what they need. You know, if it happens because the guy who runs the local chamber of commerce happens to talk to the president of the local community college. That's an essential feedback loop that is missing, and probably an area we should give a little bit of thought to improving.
Thank you very much. Next, Mr. Garamani, Mr. Walsh.
For Mr. Walsh, but I was sort of playing around with this little machine here. Turned it over. Made in China. Perhaps part of the problem is we ought to use our tax money to buy American-made equipment and American-made goods. And Mr. Walsh, I know that you've been on this issue of Buy America for a long, long time. But my question really goes to...
That was Mr. Garamandi's testimony, by the way.
But my question really goes to the issue of the jobs in your area and the skill sets that are needed. Could you describe some of those jobs and some of the skill sets associated with it?
Yeah, and I think to segue from what Mr. Himes is saying, he's right about this feedback loop, and we're getting much better at that. In my community in Mankato, they share a staffer who was a fellow teacher of mine. Then she was in administration. She works for Greater Mankato Growth, the Chamber of Commerce that's in there, and they work together. And that feedback loop is much tighter, and we still have a very active classes that teach those basic sets of skills. And what it is the ability to read technical drawings, the ability to understand the manufacturing process, how just basic things that start to set that tone. And then I think you're right. Then that segues into the trades, as you heard Mr. Norcross talk about. And in some of these cases, it's going to take advanced degrees to be able to work the very technical jobs. But for the most part, what the manufacturers are asking about is that very specific skill set and some hands-on things. To have a student get their hands on a plasma welder before they're 15, they start to find out what their aptitude are. They start to find out what their passion is. And then, as you again heard my colleagues say, these are noble professions that then they will go in that direction. But I said, as a parent, we have been conditioned to tell our children, you need to go into, what I want my son to come home and tell me he wants to be either a plumber or an auto mechanic. That'll be the happiest day of my life. I think for most of us understand that those are the skill sets that are out there. Those are things, and as a teacher, I understand this. Multiple intelligences requires us to get the best out of both of them. So I would argue that having these classes available in the high school level, starting to look at those to provide at least the exposure is what the manufacturer is saying. And it's not a cliche or whatever. They say out in my part of the country, and I'm sure in each of yours, that some of these kids who grew up on the farm and had to replace sickle blades or had to get the combine running again, those were just some of the basic things that happened because, one, they had an aptitude, and then they had opportunity to get there. So I'm making the plea in the case as a high school teacher again, we need to refocus in our schools and in those boards of education, and I'm telling you, they're going to those people and telling them, keep these programs in our schools. This is part of STEM. And don't drop off those classes that at one time were considered shop classes, and it was just where you went if you weren't going to college. That is the exact wrong way to look at this. The careers are out there, and I would say that's where we put our emphasis.
Thank you very much. I apologize to the other panelists because our time, we've got a lot of members who also have things to say. I hope everybody has observed how many of our members are participating in this. Again, because we think it's so important that we make sure that every American can make it and participate in our new economy as well as expanding our old economy. So I thank you very much for your observations. As you see, we have transcribed so that all of your testimony will be in a form that all of our members can review it, and we can use it for our updating of the Make It in America agenda. Thank you. Suzanne, did you want to say
Sure,
something?
yes, I just wanted to add one brief comment as the only woman on the panel to make clear that there are high schools like Sherwood High School in my district that has a girls-only welding class. There's always a waiting list to get in, so getting these opportunities back into our high schools will also engage more students, including girls.
Before, Mr. Norcross, Ms. Schakowsky, and she's the Chief Deputy Whip and one of our senior whips, so I'm certainly going to defer to her, but she had a question for you.
I just wanted to, I was pretty stunned by your saying that the building trades really end up being the fourth largest school system. So we're talking about unions that are providing these jobs, and I wondered if you wanted to comment at all about the intersection of actually making it in America, that is being able to live with a decent wage in America, and labor unions.
Well, certainly the backbone of the apprenticeship program, which is what the traditional 15 trades run, has been around since Christ's time, who happened to be a carpenter, and we won't hold that against him. But the most important thing here is to note that the embracement is privately funded. This isn't any government grant program that funds us close to $1.9 billion. All the apprenticeship schools are set up privately. So the fact of the matter is the infrastructure that's set up there is set up through those 15 different craft unions. And that means a pension, a health and welfare, so that the system isn't paying for them. It continues. Transportation Trust Fund is a great way to put people to work. The military spending is a great place to put people to work. And the fact of the matter is the constructions are all American jobs. Right. You're not shipping out the construction to be brought back here to the United States, and that's what's so critical. But unfortunately, because the system construction was down over the course of the last 6 to 8 years, that means those apprentices didn't have the ability. There was no work. So they are set up, the infrastructure is in place, the funding is in place, we just need to take advantage of it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and again, Don, thank you very much for the example that you're making for so many people. Now, Mr. Butterfield was supposed to be actually our first speaker, but as I told you, Mr. Butterfield was participating in a press conference with reference to the inappropriateness of displaying and purveying at the federal level, or any level for that matter, the Confederate battle flag. So we appreciate his leadership there, and we look forward to his comments now. This panel, we're going to do 15 minutes, and then we'll do the next panel for 15 minutes. We're running short on time, but I want to thank all of you for the time you've taken to prepare your testimony, participate, and for your support of this critically important agenda to our people. Mr. Butterfield.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hoyer. To my fellow colleague, Chief Deputy Whips, thank you very much for your participation. Mr. Hoyer, for the last 5 years, you have united us around a critical agenda focused on making it in America, so that cities and towns across this country can not only build products, but build an economy that benefits us all. And I recall so very clearly when you first conceived of this idea, and you gave us all baseball caps that said, "Make it in America." And I still have that cap and wear it from time to time. President Barack Obama has already signed 16 Make It in America bills into law, and we continue to develop advanced manufacturing technology that has served as the impetus for a manufacturing renaissance in the United States. Since joining the Energy and Commerce Committee, which happens to be one of the best committees in Congress, since 2007, I have been a strong advocate for growing the innovation economy. From immigration to cybersecurity, privacy to patent reform, Congress, the administration, and the private sector must all be equal partners in developing policies that keep pace with emerging technology, not stifle it. The 46 members of the Congressional Black Caucus, collectively representing more than 30 million Americans, are acutely aware of the unique challenges and the promising opportunities that come with creating jobs of the future. But America has yet to unlock the full potential of innovation because of the lack of African American representation in the Internet economy. The gross underrepresentation of African Americans on corporate boards, in the tech workforce, in contracting with these companies and at venture capital firms is alarming. While African Americans make up just 6% of STEM-related workforce, they are prolific users of technology. A Pew Research Center report shows that African Americans use the internet. They use social media as often as their white counterparts, and in some cases even more frequently. But African Americans' embrace of technology and social media has not translated into technology jobs or seats on boards of directors. For example, African Americans make up only 2% of the total workforce at social media giants Facebook and Twitter. While some progress has been made, much more needs to be done. Additionally, neither company has an African American serving on its board, 0. These companies are certainly not alone in their need to increase African American representation at all levels of their business. According to a recent Rainbow Push Coalition survey of 20 technology companies, African Americans hold just three, Mr. Hoyer, 3 out of 189 seats on major technology company boards of directors. We can do better than that. That's why the Congressional Black Caucus launched CBC Tech 2020 to bring together the best minds in the technology, nonprofit, education, and public sectors to achieve full representation of African Americans at every level. First, we must make targeted investments in STEM education, starting in the middle school. According to the Level Playing Field Institute, there will be an estimated 1.4 million new tech jobs by 2020. 70% of those jobs will remain unfilled at the current rate U.S. universities are producing qualified graduates. The solution cannot be to simply look abroad for people to fill these roles. America must develop homegrown talent, men and women from rural and urban America, those from well-represented and underrepresented communities, to power the innovation economy. We must also ensure that our HBCUs, that means historically black colleges and universities, have the resources necessary to prepare our students to be competitive. Second, we must see greater transparency from tech companies, particularly those who have not released their data. Some have not released their diversity data. This is the first step toward improving the diversity of the industry. Finally, and I'm closing, we invite organizations to work with us to produce a Tech 2020 African American inclusion plan. Each company would draft a plan that fits its unique circumstances in the marketplace, would set goals and commit resources and outline action items to increase inclusion. We want to work in partnership with you, with these companies, to produce substantive and attainable goals, and the response that we've received to date has been very encouraging. Colleagues, we know that the best days of American innovation are ahead, but we can only be successful if we all put our best minds to work. Thank you. I yield back.
I appreciate your testimony. Mr. Garamendi. Mr. Garamendi, I might observe, has probably been as active in the Make It in America focus as any member of our caucus, and I thank him for that. And Mr. Garamendi.
Well, Mr. Hoyer, thank you so very much for your leadership. We really can make it in America, and we really must. On every seat up there, there's this little machine. I guess it's some sort of a video. On the back of it, you'll find it's made in China. Your tax money, our constituents' tax money, was used to buy a Chinese implement. That ought to be an American-made implement. And when we do the trade deal, we ought to pay attention to Buy America standards and whether they are in it or not. But my testimony today is on another issue. It's on one of the oldest industries in America, shipbuilding. We are on the verge of exporting liquefied natural gas. The current facility in Cheniere, the Cheniere facility in the south, in the Gulf Coast, will need 100 ships when it reaches full production, full export capacity. Those ships ought to be American-made. This is not a new issue. This is a national security issue dating back to the very earliest days of this nation. Shipbuilding is absolutely essential to our Navy. It's essential to our mariners. Our mariners are essential to the ability to move American military supplies, men and women, across the ocean when needed. If we're going to honor our national security, we must build ships, not just naval ships, but also commercial ships. The LNG export trade offers an opportunity. Remember when the North Slope of Alaska opened, we required that those oil shipments be on American ships. We should do the same. We're talking over 100 ships for the first facility built on the Gulf Coast. There are 6 other facilities that are in line to be built. We could build these ships in America. We're going to have to ramp up. It'll take a while. But in doing so, we're going to create jobs, lots of jobs. There are 117 active shipyards in the United States spread across 26 states. Their gross domestic product is well over $7.9 billion in labor income, $23.9 billion if you add up all of the related jobs on the supply train. That's where we are today. We might be able to increase that by 50%. We can provide jobs in those states that have very high unemployment, like the South Coast states, and states like California, Maryland, and other parts of the United States. This is an opportunity that we should not miss. And in doing so, it's not only the shipyards, but we're talking about the mariners that would be on those ships. American-built ships, American-flagged, American mariners, American jobs. It's possible. All it takes is 16 lines of law. That's our work, writing the law. Thank you, Mr. Hoyer, for bringing us all together.
Thank you very much, Mr. Garamendi. Next, I'd like to go to Ms. Bustos, who has been very involved in Make It in America and had a number of hearings and efforts in her own district on reviving and revitalizing and expanding American manufacturing. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Congressman
Congresswoman
Hoyer.
Bustos.
Well, and thanks for organizing today's hearing and leading the Make It in America all of these years, Mr. Hoyer. Also want to thank my colleagues up here and sitting up there as well for fighting for American workers tirelessly. And you know, I think in the short time that I've been here, revitalizing American manufacturing has been my top priority. I'm only in the early in my second term. In my region of the state of Illinois, which is all the northwestern part of the state and into central Illinois, we have a strong and deep history and foundation in manufacturing. And because of where my district is situated, we're working on developing what we would call a real manufacturing triangle. And that's among the Quad Cities, where we have the world headquarters for John Deere, in Peoria, where we have the world headquarters for Caterpillar, and in the northern part of my district in Rockford, Illinois, where we have major aerospace manufacturing. And in between all of that, we have many, many smaller manufacturing entities that feed into this and feed into other manufacturing businesses. And I believe that we have a workforce, manufacturing workforce, that is second to none. Yet still, we struggle with many of the same problems that communities across our country are facing. There's a mismatch between the skills that workers have and the skills that employers need. We have entrepreneurs who find it difficult to secure the capital needed to make their ideas, take their ideas to the next level. And the hardworking families who are playing by the rules and feel that the American dream is slipping away and farther from their reach. Soon after I first came to Congress, I joined with the University of Illinois to launch Partnering for Illinois' Economic Future. And we've been a team in economic development ever since then. One of our most important successes that we've brought to the state of Illinois is a Digital Manufacturing Design and Innovation Institute. I had the opportunity to make a personal pitch to the president when he flew to our district on Air Force One, and I got to sit knee to knee with him on Marine One, and I said that this was very important to his home state of Illinois, and that when the application came across his desk, would he seriously take a look at that and make sure that we landed this in Illinois. And,
good for you.
And we did. Illinois and the region that I represent in particular are really perfectly suited for this investment to drive the renaissance in American manufacturing, and really, I would say, the next industrial revolution. This digital manufacturing lab will help our region, our state, and our country achieve our full economic potential and be home to even more of the good-paying and innovative manufacturing research jobs of the future. The manufacturing lab's research work will help develop innovative solutions that transform defense and civilian manufacturing and create jobs. Because many of these jobs will require new and advanced skills, the Digital Lab will also partner with educational institutions, trade organizations, and local economic development organizations on workforce development. This sort of initiative is only possible with a tremendous amount of collaboration and cooperation. There is no one agency, industry, or sector that can do this alone. It is a true public-private partnership. I have long believed that collaboration across sectors, whether formal or informal, is a key to building a strong economic future. That's why in my district I've also hosted a series of regional economic meetings that lead to an economic summit. We've done this this will be our third year doing this. And this is our opportunities to share best practices, discuss challenges and opportunities, and figure out what we need for our future. Because if you want to achieve big things, you have to work together. It is my hope that we can bring this collaborative approach that I've pursued in Illinois to a national level. I'm currently working to draft legislation that would direct the President to develop a national manufacturing strategy. It would identify sectors and emerging technologies in which American manufacturing can grow and be most competitive internationally. The bill would be aimed at spurring job growth, making American manufacturing more competitive, and rebuilding the manufacturing sector, all of which are critical to continuing our nation's economic recovery. In fact, the United States is one of the only developed nations without a national manufacturing strategy. I hope to incorporate this legislation into the Make It in America initiative in the coming months. By working together, we can strengthen American manufacturing, American workers, and the American dream. And thank you, Mr. Hoyer, for this opportunity to speak with you today.
I thank you very much, Congresswoman Bustos, for that. And as you know, and we've worked together on this, the coordination of a national manufacturing strategy is absolutely critical, so I thank you for your leadership on that issue. Every other nation that we're competing with has such a strategy. We have believed that we have done so well that we didn't need a strategy, but any team that's going to win needs a good playbook. Absolutely. So thank you for your leadership. Elizabeth Esty of Western Connecticut.
Thank you very much.
Congressman, thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Whip Hoyer. Thank you for convening us here today, to my colleagues, and for your leadership on this critically important topic for our country. Manufacturing has long been the backbone of our economy, and in order to ensure that our nation's strong economic future is bright, we must support our manufacturing and innovation ecosystem. I come from a third-generation manufacturing family, so I grew up knowing how important it is to pass along these skills and how committed, particularly family manufacturing companies, are to ensuring an educated workforce for the future. They know, and we know, that quality employees are the #1 most important resource that we have, and we need to be investing in American workers. We cannot strengthen manufacturing without a 21st century workforce with the skills that employees need. That's why I was so proud to introduce recently the Manufacturing Universities Act of 2015. This is a bipartisan bill which would establish a manufacturing universities program at the National Institutes of Standards and Technology, also known as NIST. This will help colleges and universities with existing engineering programs to sharpen their focus on manufacturing, developing joint projects with local manufacturing firms, and supporting student internships with community manufacturers, something we've already heard about today. Representative Norcross emphasized the importance of that tight interconnection, and my colleague, Representative Himes. By increasing the focus on manufacturing at the collegiate level, we can target students who have already shown an aptitude for and dedication to science, technology, engineering, and math, our STEM fields that are so critical to modern manufacturing. But securing our manufacturing future requires more than just preparing our students. We must support existing businesses who want to keep these jobs in America. Connecticut is home to more than 5,000 manufacturers, and many are small businesses supplying manufactured goods to our nation's infrastructure, aerospace, and defense industries. In fact, Connecticut was just recognized by the Department of Commerce and the White House as a leader in these industries and designated as an advanced manufacturing community under the administration's Investing in Manufacturers Community Partnership Initiative. And I, too, took advantage of an opportunity to recommend to the President that he support the strong initiatives in my state. Connecticut deserves this recognition and the support it brings to our small manufacturers competing to survive in a tough economic time. In January, I introduced the American Jobs Matter Act, a bill to support our manufacturers in Connecticut and across this country, and this dovetails on Representative Garamendi's Buy It with American Taxpayer Dollars initiatives. The American Jobs Matter Act would require the Department of Defense to consider the effect and impact on American jobs when issuing contracts. Since 2007, our military has spent more than $150 billion on manufactured goods produced overseas. $150 billion of taxpayer money. This makes no sense. We should not be spending our taxpayer dollars on funding jobs overseas when we should be supporting jobs right here at home. Americans' manufacturing future is great, but it's our job to protect and support it. Despite deep divisions in Congress, we have unparalleled opportunities right now to pass bipartisan policies that support our small businesses, bolster our highly trained workforce, and maintain our global leadership in research, innovation, and technology. Every district in this country has manufacturers making high-quality products, teachers sparking their interest in STEM education, and employers who want good-paying jobs so they can provide for their families. I've always worked to find allies, both Republicans and Democrats, dedicated to creating and growing American jobs. For example, we have opportunities on brownfields to find support and put back in productive play former industrial sites and creating good-paying jobs in our inner cities where we need them so much. We have 500,000 sites nationwide that need revitalization, and my bill, which I urge my colleagues to sign on to, can help support putting these properties back into play. By rising above partisan politics and focusing on common sense, practical policies, our bipartisan efforts can stimulate real economic growth. Together, we can ensure that America remains the global leader in innovation and discovery for generations to come. Thank you, Representative Hoyer, our distinguished whip, for holding this important hearing on Make It in America agenda and for allowing me to serve on this panel.
Thank you for your testimony, and also thank you for your initiatives that you have put forward. I now want to yield to Ms. Sinema, who has a question for, I think, Ms. Bustos.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Whip. And Representative Bustos, thank you so much for being here today. You know, we've heard members talk about the importance of training and skill building for folks in their communities. I was wondering if you could talk a little about the role of community colleges and how that might have an impact on workforce training, particularly in rural communities.
Well, it's absolutely critical to workforce training, and we talked a little bit just earlier about that skills gap. Community colleges are able to be more nimble in their curriculum. They have natural collaborations with businesses so they can identify those needs. Just last week when we were all back home in our home districts, I visited with a business called Pegasus Industries out of a town called Galesburg, Illinois. Galesburg has been hit tremendously hard because of bad trade policy. Maytag plant shipped 1,600 jobs to Mexico overnight, and that was more than 10 years ago. Still, the salaries there are about 30% less than they were back in those days. So this Pegasus manufacturing, it's got job openings that they can't fill because of that skills gap. So what we convened the community college there, Carl Sandburg College, brought them together with Pegasus to help identify what their needs are so they can start filling these. I think they play an absolutely critical role nationally, and we need to engage them. Thank you for your question.
Question for Ms. Esty.
Let me thank all of you for your testimony today, and particularly I want to thank the whip for holding this hearing on Making it in America. What's next? What's the next move? Ms. Esty, it is towards you, but it kind of tails into what Mr. Garmendi was talking about as well. I know that shipbuilding is a big, big industry in your state as well, and you talked about Manufacturing Universities Bill to help college and universities improve and expand the focus on manufacturing innovation. I think something to keep in mind that is, we're running at a risk here, is that it's expected that we need a 20% increase in the number of captains for people to actually man the ships and run these ships. I represent the New York State Maritime Academy. We can't just rely upon the federal institution for that the development. So I know that you have Cal Maritime in your state, and we just, our ship literally is outdated, and we have to have a new one built. But it's not just for us, it's for our entire region. In fact, will help Massachusetts State Maritime Academy. They all kind of help each other. But John, it also goes to what you're talking about in terms of the shipbuilding industry. We're going to see a 20% increase in the need for men and women to operate these vessels. So I didn't know if maybe you just want to talk about that as well, in terms of the engineering schools, focused here on the expansion in a big way in terms of making it America.
Just very, very quickly. Yes, while we need 20%, we're also seeing an extraordinarily rapid decline in the American maritime industry. The number of ships under American flag now is less than 100. It used to be 1,500 30 years ago. So what do we do about it? I've made one suggestion about it, but there are all of these pieces of the puzzle that need to be put together. We simply need to have a coherent American policy that recognizes that the economic strength of this nation in all of its various sectors, and we've heard much discussion here, is of paramount importance to our national security, as well as the well-being of the American middle class. So the educational systems are critically important along the way of this much discussion. I would note that we passed an education bill yesterday out of the House of Representatives that does not deal with any of the education issues in the fullness necessary for this nation.
Ms. Esty, would you like to comment as well?
Absolutely. And in addition to this university level skills we're talking about, to dovetail off of what my friend Representative Bustos talked about, the community college appointment is critically important. Electric Boat in Representative Courtney's district in the great state of Connecticut is looking for welders constantly. Hundreds of positions open, and thanks to the recent contracts, going to be thousands of positions open, which is why Naugatuck Valley Community College in my district has an advanced welding program, a one-year certificate. They have 100% placement virtually for all of those positions. And those folks have jobs between $50,000 and, by a few years out, $100,000 a year. And so we are working very closely. Connecticut actually kept intact its vocational high schools. It's the state in the country that has done the best job in keeping those vocational high schools intact, and that has allowed us a much tighter linkage, frankly, with local communities, working with our community colleges. It is a model that when we brought the Deputy Secretary of Labor to come see what we were doing, he said, this is what we need to be doing across the country. Have councils of local communities that sit with their community colleges, their universities, and not just their high schools. Frankly, we need to get back into our middle schools. We need to be looking at shop classes and hands-on training as well, and that's going to be vitally important for all of these jobs.
I want to thank you. I still want to thank you. I want to push the button. The technology has gotten beyond me. I want to thank you very much for your testimony, but much more importantly for the initiatives and work that you are doing to make sure that not only do our people have jobs, but they also have the skills for the jobs that are available. It's going to be critical. The United Negro College Fund has a wonderful statement that I always use: a mind is a terrible thing to waste. And we don't have a person to waste, and we need to make sure that all of our people are trained so that they can fill the jobs of the 21st century. Thank you very, very much. Next panel will be Joe Kennedy from Massachusetts, Annie Custer of New Hampshire, and Mrs. Debbie Dingell of Michigan. I want to note that Ms. Bonamici observed that she was only the only woman on her panel. You will note that we've had a majority of women on the panel since. Yes, as it should be, according to Congresswoman Sinema. Who are we starting with? Okay. Mr. Kennedy, thank you very much for being with us. Congressman Kennedy from Massachusetts.
Mr.
Look
Hoyer,
forward to
thank
your
you very
testimony.
much. Mr. Whip, it is an honor for me to be here and to have been able to listen to some of the testimony of our colleagues and to hear about some great initiatives that are taking place all across this country. To my colleagues on this panel, Ms. Custer and Ms. Dingell, it is a pleasure to be here with you guys as well. To Mr. Hoyer, there has been no greater champion of American workers throughout, in this Congress and throughout your entire career than you. And so your leadership that has helped guide this caucus and your unwavering commitment to democratic values through initiatives like this continues to guide our caucus. So I thank you for calling all of us here together today. With unemployment in our country reaching the lowest levels we've experienced in 7 years and the longest streak of private sector job growth on record, there's no doubt that our economy is on a steady pathway to recovery. But below these headlines, there's an undercurrent that cannot be ignored. Our working and middle-class communities are still struggling to access these recent economic gains. In my district, older industrial cities and towns like Fall River and Taunton are navigating unemployment rates that are over double the state rate. These are proud communities that share something in common with hundreds of others like them across the country. A heritage of work ethic, ingenuity, and skill that they have cultivated since the Industrial Revolution, carefully passed from one generation to the next. These are the communities that coined the term "Made in America," that made that phrase really mean something. To leave them behind now wouldn't just turn a cold shoulder on our past, but undermine our future. There's no question that new industries are powering today's economy. Where we once had textiles and jewelry and silver, we now have healthcare and clean energy and robotics. But these innovative new sectors still require the most fundamental thing as our building blocks of industry: high quality, innovative, and sustainable goods made right here on American soil. Whether it's a wind turbine, a prosthetic knee, or an air pollution monitor, there is a thriving role for American manufacturing in our increasingly technology-driven world. The numbers back that up. During the same streak of private sector job growth that I mentioned earlier, we've added nearly 1 million manufacturing jobs. In Massachusetts, the manufacturing sector employs about 250,000 people with wages $20,000 higher than the state average. That potential for manufacturing to bridge the gap between communities thriving in our modern economy and those working day and night to catch up is why I was proud to introduce the Revitalize American Manufacturing and Innovation Act last year. This bill creates a network of manufacturing institutes across the country, each dedicated to a modern manufacturing process or challenge. With institutes now up and running in Youngstown, Chicago, Knoxville, Detroit, and Raleigh, we know the model is working. We know that bringing academia, industry, and government together under one roof spurs innovation in our manufacturing sector. And we know that we can and should replicate those institutes in new regions around the country so we can continue to create jobs and train workers who will fill them. Through initiatives like Mr. Hoyer's Make It in America agenda and legislation like RAMI, we can transform abandoned factories and warehouses that dot main streets across this country from relics of an industrial past into thriving emblems of an economy that gives every American community a seat at the table. I'm looking forward to working with my colleagues on this panel and all of Congress to invest in American workers and rebuild the manufacturing sector that has always defined our economy. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your leadership, Congressman. Congresswoman Annie Kuster from New Hampshire.
Thank you very much, and I'm thrilled to join.
I might say that I've had the opportunity to tour a couple of manufacturing facilities with Ms. Kuster in her district, and they're very, very interesting, and she's been very focused on this. Thank you very much for being here.
Well, thank you, Mr. Hoyer, for your leadership, and to all of my colleagues who have joined us here today. It's so important that we can be talking about opportunity and innovation in growing our economy. Since taking office just over 2.5 years ago, my #1 priority has been to help local businesses create jobs and opportunity for workers in the Granite State. But a recent study by the New England Council shows that many folks simply don't understand the importance of our country's manufacturing sector. In New England and across the country, people think it's a dead art, a declining industry. But since taking office, I have traveled all across my district, visiting over 50 companies in my Congress at Your Company visits. And what I've discovered is exactly the opposite, that companies are thriving and leading with innovation, modernizing and revitalizing our state's manufacturing industry. Most of the old-fashioned and dangerous tools of yesterday have been replaced with innovative new equipment and computerized technology of the future. But the conversation that we need to be having with parents and students and community leaders across the country is how do we get this story out? We have a wonderful program that started out Manufacturing Day. It's now extended to Manufacturing Week, bringing hundreds of students all across the state into the companies so that they can see what this new innovation economy is all about. We're creating videos so that parents will understand these are good jobs. Community colleges are training people that are coming out straight into jobs that are in the $50,000 to $100,000 range with good benefits. And I want to make sure that people in my community know about this. Precision manufacturing, which we refer to as custom tailoring products to meet the demands of the new economy, has become the hot new tool for manufacturers all across New Hampshire, and this is how we will lead the way. But this New England Council report found some impediments as well in education, in innovation, and transportation. So one of my top priorities has been education, and I know my colleagues share this goal with me. New Hampshire sadly ranks number 2 in average college debt. I do want to point out we're number 1 in paying back that debt. But it makes college cost prohibitive for so many hardworking families. So I'm working with all of you to keep interest rates down, to help families save, and to try to contain college costs. But I want to work with Mr. Norcross, Mr. Himes, and others in that community college, building up opportunity and apprenticeships as well. Right in my hometown of Concord, New Hampshire, the New Hampshire Technical Institute is number 1 in the country for value-added opportunity, according to the Brookings Institute. NHTI students are receiving excellent education and training and meeting and surpassing expected outcomes upon graduation with very good prospects for their future. I also want to talk briefly about innovation, and I thank my colleague, Mr. Kennedy, for talking about the Revitalize American Manufacturing and Innovation Act. We, too, are fighting, and I think I just have to arrange, as Ms. Bustos did, to get on a helicopter with the President. Maybe we can we're working hard to bring a manufacturing institute to New Hampshire and New England.
This apparently is the new strategy for...
Yes. And beyond education and innovation, I think we can all agree that transportation is high on the list. If we want to lead in the 21st century economy, we've got to move past our 20th century transportation infrastructure. That's the number 1 issue I hear. I keep expecting in these visits when I say, what can the federal government do for you, or how can we get out of the way? And number 1 is help me get my employees to work and get my goods to market. And I think that's critical that we work on our roads and bridges and highways. So I'm going to end there by just saying that we need to harness this new technology. I'm excited to be working with you, Mr. Hoyer, and with all of our colleagues. And across the country, let's make sure that people can truly make it in America. Thank you.
Thank you very much, again, for your leadership and your testimony and for the work that you do on behalf of New Hampshire, but also on behalf of our country. And now, someone, I was told by my staff not to do any background on these folks, but someone who's been involved in major manufacturing in our country for probably as long, if not longer, than any of the members of Congress in a very, very effective way. Represents an extraordinary tradition of a dingle in the Congress of the United States, who have always spoken up very, very strongly for American manufacturing. Mrs. Debbie Dingell, Congresswoman Dingell from Michigan.
Thank you, Mr. Hoyer, and I thank you very much to all of you and my colleagues for coming together to talk about the subject to America. And my testimony this afternoon is turning out to be timely due to some unfortunate news and showing why this subject is so important, and to be here with my 2 colleagues, both of whose states I've actually been in the last year, and associate myself with all of the comments that they've made. But manufacturing has been the backbone of our nation's economy, and the auto industry has been a big part of it. I'm a car girl, born and bred, proud of it. But as Henry Ford recognized in offering the revolutionary $5 workday, manufacturing jobs have been a pathway for the middle class for millions of families for decades. Nearly 100 years later, manufacturing jobs, especially in the auto industry, continue to provide hardworking families a chance to earn a fair wage and to get ahead. But we have a lot of challenges to face and to providing opportunity to everyone. And as I left the floor today, I learned that Ford Motor Company is going to be moving production of 2 vehicles, the Focus and the C-Max, out of their Michigan assembly plant in Michigan, 4,000 jobs to Mexico. To quote the Detroit Free Press, the move comes as a host of automakers are building new plants in Mexico instead of the U.S. And Ford's only comment was it's going to produce those vehicles where it's the most competitive. Small cars like the Focus, you can tell I'm upset, because we just passed a bill on the House floor that didn't address currency manipulation. And until we do, we're going to start seeing more jobs and jobs going to Mexico. Since we have passed, NAFTA, and since we passed the Korea Free Trade Agreement, both of which I supported, we have lost 5 million jobs in this country because of currency manipulation. I talked to Ford Motor Company as I was walking over here. They've got to make decisions based on where their profit is. And when you look at these small cars, the profit margin is small. And the profit on them is right down to what that currency manipulation is. We're most vulnerable to unfair trade practices. We can't afford to have our small car production and the jobs it creates keep going overseas. We need to support our workers by putting a stop to currency manipulation that gives them an unfair advantage. The reality is Toyota makes more in currency manipulation in the United States than Ford did in their worldwide operations last year. That's wrong. We've got to have strong enforcement protections against currency manipulation. It needs to be a pillar of all of our trade agreements, and I sure hope that when TPP comes to the floor, those people that say they care about it are going to look long and hard at that bill before they support it. But in addition to combating currency manipulation, there are other things that we can do to help new companies create manufacturing jobs in the U.S. Associating myself with both of my other colleagues' comments, one successful program has been the creation of the National Network for Manufacturing Innovation. We, like others, have one in Michigan where we work together. I didn't sit on a helicopter with the president either, but all of us pulled together in the business academic community, working together to get in with our government to get that located in Michigan. And the Lightweight Innovations for Tomorrow Institute opened 6 months ago as a partnership between the Navy and nearly 50 other government, academic, and private sector entities. And this institute's studying difficult 21st century questions like the challenges of joining dissimilar metals and manufacturing thinner, stronger, lightweight parts, which is critical for us to understand in a global marketplace. We've got to do more to support emerging manufacturers, too. We lost the flat screen technology because the reality is other countries are more supportive with their policies. They give tax incentives, they give capital. Here it is difficult to find capital. As a result, critical benefits of having our nation lead a new generation of products to market are lost, and the benefits that are gained by other nations. Scaling up advanced manufacturing projects is different than many other industries. Silicon Valley is awash in venture capitalists and other private sector funders, but emerging manufacturers often do not have access to that similar capital structure. There are a number of reasons, but unlike apps that don't require a lot of capital, construction of a new production facility requires a big capital commitment, up to $100 million. And the payback timeline is often 10 years, whereas non-manufacturing projects require less capital and have much shorter payback timelines. Manufacturing's always been the heart of Michigan, and it's going to stay that way. We've got to fight to keep it there. It built the middle class, and we owe our young entrepreneurs and manufacturers to help them build their businesses here in the United States. In 2014, the President's Advanced Manufacturing Partnership recommended we establish a public-private partnership to provide funding to scale up manufacturing projects. A fund like this could be modeled after the successful Transportation Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act or the Small Business Investment Company models, which combine public with a market-driven mechanism to select recipients. We've got to join together. We've got to fight to keep these jobs in our country. There are many other things we could do. I could talk about it all afternoon. But we owe it to our next generation of manufacturers, to the hardworking men and women to keep jobs in America. Thank you. I'm just upset. 4,000 jobs.
I love Debbie Dingell, folks. And I love her because of her passion, her focus, and her extraordinary knowledge. Unfortunately, we have a short time, and I'm going to go just maybe 3 minutes, so we're going to do 30-second questions for each one of you, and then a 1-minute answer, and then we got to get to the next panel because we're going to have a vote, and I don't want to run out of time. Mr. Lewis, I understand you have a question of Mr. Kennedy.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Hoyer. Let me just take a moment to thank you for your leadership, for your vision, coming forth and make it in America. Mr. Kennedy, and let me just ask you, without a modern-day highway system, without building infrastructure, how can we make it in America when our roads are dilapidated and our bridges are falling down, our waterways, our whole transportation system is rotten to the core? How can we make it in America?
Mr. Lewis, sir, you have been dedicated your entire life to investing in our country and on the promise that tomorrow will be better than today. And the answer to your question, sir, is to have you and others continue to make that case. All of the challenges that you just spoke of, highway funding being one of them, our education system, which a number of our colleagues already touched on as well. Those challenges are largely of our own creation, and it is well within the powers of the folks that occupy these halls to address them. So investments in transportation funding to make our country more competitive, get people back to work, a critical piece to this. An investment in a skills system to our community colleges and vocational schools to teach our workers a true trade. Initiatives like those manufacturing institutes to bring together government, academia, workers, and innovation to create the next products. All of this is possible if there's a political will to do so, and we need to generate that will. No one's better at that than you.
Thank you.
All right, and Mr. Sean Patrick Maloney of New York has a question, I understand, of Ms. Custer.
Ms. Custer, before I was from New York, I grew up in New Hampshire, and you have the distinction of representing my family and the place I grew up in, and so I'm particularly interested in all of the initiatives.
Sounds to me like Mr. Maloney may be running for president.
I have a husband who's from Iowa, sir, so we really got it pretty mapped out. But the fact is I'm very interested in what is working in New Hampshire as someone who grew up looking at the abandoned factories in Manchester and in Keene and in White River Junction border in Vermont. You know, a lot of us played hockey in those dilapidated arenas and had friends who didn't go off to great colleges and who were looking for work in a lot of towns that had seen better days. But there's a lot going on in New Hampshire now. Can you tell us about some of the industries that are emerging and what we can learn from that?
Absolutely, and thank you so much. There's no better place to start than a favorite son from New Hampshire, so we'd be proud to have you. Let me just tell you one quick story. Keene, New Hampshire, in the western part of my state, we have a state college, we have a community college, and we have a K through 12 public school system. They have come together with the private sector employers in that community and created an entrepreneurial innovation center that is a collaboration and a cooperative venture. We've got young people coming in from the high school. We've got a whole new advanced manufacturing, precision manufacturing program from the community colleges, and we've got the college grads that are also engaged. We're trying to get people excited about opportunities that are going on with various programs, and one of the things I love is they have these particular like challenges. You know, can you come up with a new product? Can you? And I had the opportunity to go to their graduation recently. Students, one after another, just fantastic new ideas. And so the next step for us is to bring the funders in and make sure that we have the entrepreneurs connected with the funders. But I have a bill that is about connecting the community colleges to the manufacturers in the region and to these new companies so that we can make sure that the education, it's a virtuous cycle, make sure that they have the skills that they need. Dartmouth, from Hanover where you are, has a Dartmouth Entrepreneurial Network to connect the funders to the new ideas. Manchester has the same. So it's something that I'm very excited about. I think we can get a virtuous cycle going where we're educating people for the jobs of tomorrow, and we just need to make sure that we have that transportation structure to get the goods to market. Thank you.
Mr. Welch has a question for Ms. Dingle.
I don't know if you can do this briefly, but how does the currency manipulation work?
I can do this very briefly, but I'll talk to you all night about it too. The fact is that for a vehicle, it's their $8,000 cost differential with the yen at 124 to 1, so that Japan, Toyota, then uses it to either undercut the parts of a car to undercut the cost of the car in the market, or to advertise it. That's just a straight differential, 8,124 to 1. Wow. I'll talk to you more after this. Great. Thank you.
Clearly, the automobile industry, Ford in particular, very, very animated about that. I've talked to all of us about it.
I wish to make it clear that Ford, GM, Chrysler, and the UAW, you never get them to agree on anything in this day and age. Agree currency manipulation is the #1 issue. Yeah.
Thank you very much, panel. We appreciate it. Next panel that we're coming up with is, let me see here. I'm pleased to introduce the fourth and final panel today. We're running a little over schedule. We started a little late. We're going to take a half an hour, hopefully, before votes. We thank very much. John, why don't you come on up here? Keep me company. I want to thank all the members who participated on the panel. I want to thank the panelists as well. We're now going to invite Representative Grace Napolitano of California, Representative Joe Courtney of Connecticut, Representative Jerry Connolly of Virginia, Representative Sean Patrick Maloney of New Hampshire and New York. It says here just New York, but I thought I'd add that for you, Sean. And Representative Norma Torres. I've been to a number of these districts, but the first time I met Norma Torres was at a Make It in America forum of manufacturers and business community and chambers of commerce, and I thank her for her leadership. They are now seated, and so I will call on Ms. Napolitano. We're going to go from left to right, our most senior to our most junior, all of whom have very insightful testimony. Ms. Napolitano, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for the invitation, and I agree with all the comments of my colleagues in prior statements to thank you for all you're doing on this issue.
Thank you.
In my area, in Southern California, as you well know, California is a big state with a lot of big issues and a lot of problems. We've looking at more investments in infrastructure and education and small business support. In our area, I've visited businesses who have export capability. They have some problems in hiring and finding qualified individuals to be able to put on their payroll. Some of them say their business is picking up, but is still very slow. The recession is not quite rebounding as much as they would want to. Many jobs sent overseas have not returned. Manufacturing continues to be a big issue, being able to help small business understand their ability to be able to export abroad. So we're now holding our 4th seminar on exports only. The unintended consequences of the Made in America happened last year in regard to infrastructure for the California Department of Transportation and Metropolitan Transit Authority, where these long-term contracts required them to have materials that were not made in the U.S. or were not able to provide them here. So there were $5.7 billion in projects to continue without delay, and we preserved 100,000 jobs just by being able to get a waiver until they were able, which was maybe 4 months of a waiver. It wasn't a very long one. So we need to be sure those unintended consequences are identified so we don't have to worry about them. We do need a 6-year transportation bill. We do need to refund Import-Export Bank because it's central to our small business' ability to do outreach to other countries to sell their product. And then, of course, I have a whole bunch of other little things that I wrote down. Education is a big issue, simply because our community colleges are not able to expand the ability to capture education of our veterans who are coming back and being able to get training to get into jobs other than what they've learned in the military. Mental health plays a big part of that, in that many of them need services that the VA is not equipped, is not trained. They don't have enough mental health providers. We need to train those individuals because they have the talent to be able to make America stronger. Water, big issue. Drought continues. We need to understand that we need to fund the ability for us to get new innovative ways of cleaning our water or finding the status of our aquifers or being able to capture, because we will have continuing drought cycles. Railroads, we need to build our rail cars in the U.S. We have always banked on Europe or other countries to make them. We need to bring that manufacturing back. The energy storage, they're innovative. You have Silicon Valley, you have ag in California is one of the biggest producers of revenue. We somehow need to be able to expand that to our universities, college, to be able to train. But let's not forget our dropout rate is extraordinarily bad. So we need to ensure that those children who are not able to get back to school, for whatever the reason, that we work with the programs that are helping our youth get back on track, back to school, productive citizens, and can be great for our economy in the future. So with that, I will.
Thank you very much.
That's enough.
And we're going to try to go relatively quickly because I don't want I don't want the bell to ring and we're out of time. So I want to get to Norma as well. Congressman Courtney.
Thank you, Mr. Hoyer, and really salute you for holding a hearing, which I think in many respects is the question of the day, which is how do we create jobs that people can build futures around and support themselves and their families. As you know, I represent Eastern Connecticut, home of Electric Boat Shipyard, which since 60 years ago, with the launch of the USS Nautilus, has been building nuclear submarines, probably the most complex form of shipbuilding in the world. When we took majority in 2007, the programs building it were limping along. Our industrial base had virtually collapsed, both in Connecticut and Virginia. And actually, with our new majority, we boosted the shipbuilding account so that, as was mentioned earlier, last year the U.S. Navy signed the largest shipbuilding contract in American history with the Virginia-class program. So the yard in southeastern Connecticut, which was hovering at around 6,000 jobs when I came into office in 2007, is now over 9,000, and it's slated to go to 13,000 over the next couple of years or so. But in many
That'll
respects,
be a 100% increase in jobs.
That's correct. And we're talking metal trades, engineer, design. These are very high-value jobs. But I think what's also important to remember, this is not just a parochial benefit. There are over 5,000 suppliers around the country in over 48 states. A lot of the precision manufacturing that Congressman Custer is talking about are exactly those types of folks. I mean, you know, there is no margin for error when you're building vessels that do not sustain human life, when you've got 135 human souls on board serving our country. So again, it's a program that has not had a nuclear reactor accident in over 60 years. So it's an amazing, actually, story in terms of our country. What I would just note, and Mr. Garamendi mentioned this, you know, that's sort of the good news, and is that we have seen a virtual collapse of commercial shipbuilding in this country. And frankly, that creates a very big challenge for the Navy in terms of having a stable industrial base. I mean, in aerospace, sometimes the engine manufacturers, the frame manufacturers, they can sort of compensate for ups and downs in terms of orders because you've got the commercial work here. And the loss is really, you know, heartbreaking. The average wage in shipbuilding, according to the Shipbuilder Council of America, is about $79,000 a year. That's over half, 50% higher than the non-shipbuilding sectors are. And what I would just note is that the U.S. Department of Transportation Maritime Administration later this year is going to come out with the first maritime strategy for our country since 1937. I mean, pre-World War II. And this is going to be a great opportunity. Again, Joe Crowley talked about how we need to bolster the ranks of captains and people who can drive ships. And it is going to be a comprehensive report that covers about 14 or 15 departments and agencies of the federal government to get us back in the game as a nation. With the opening of widening of the Panama Canal, there are going to be large supertankers with the change in EPA rules for discharge by diesel engines. We need to get more environmentally up to date. And this is an opportunity for our country. And these are outstanding jobs. And again, I think our caucus is going to be right there at the cutting edge to lead the way to make sure that that plan is implemented so that this nation will not concede. It is a great maritime nation that we live in. 95% of goods come by sea. It is frankly unforgivable for us to allow that deterioration to take place. And I know with your leadership, we're going to be, again, there making sure that that is going to be part of America's future.
Thank you very much, Congressman Courtney. Congressman Maloney.
Well, thank you, Mr. Whip. Let me echo my appreciation for your focus on these issues. I represent the Hudson Valley of New York. For those of you who haven't been to my district just above New York City, it's a beautiful region with hundreds of small family farms that actually line both sides of the river. In addition to this, we have an emerging biotechnology sector in Westchester County and many young manufacturing operations of all types. But I'd like to focus my remarks on farming today because it's been such a key part of life in the Hudson Valley for hundreds of years. We are home to what's known as the Black Dirt region, one of only 2 such regions in the country. And it's not uncommon to see a farmer who's the 5th or 6th generation of a family farming in the region. We have particular expertise in specialty crops and are perfectly aligned to excel in a world that is focused on locally sourced product and farm-to-table products. But the future of the industry is uncertain because young farmers are facing so many obstacles today. The average age of our farmer in the Hudson Valley is 57. In order to ensure the future viability of farming in the region, we have to act now to ensure that the next generation of farmers can be there and thrive. Right now, we are falling behind on this task. You can see it when you talk to people like a young man named Leon in Dutchess County, who works on a community farm project. He told me that he and his wife desperately want to start a farm of their own, but they're not sure how they could get the money together to access the land. We need to do more for people like Maddie in Putnam County. She came to my office and she said all she's ever wanted to do was farm. But given the amount of loans debt she has from going to college, she can't get the money together either. Jenny Christ in Orange County is doing a little bit better. She's the 5th generation of her family to run the apple farm. Jenny's a very bright young woman. She went to Dartmouth College in Hanover, New Hampshire, represented by Ms. Custer. But she wanted to come back and use that knowledge on the farm. And she has invested north of $1 million in new equipment to size and to sort the apples in new ways, to access new markets, and to improve their yield and their performance. And all of the learning and all of the knowledge that she gained at an Ivy League college has been poured right back into that farm to help serve the region and her customers and to build that business. But she needed access to capital to do that. She needed to be able to invest in that new high-tech equipment, which makes her able to access the larger suppliers and larger markets that are nearby but that have higher standards than ever before. So we can do more to help people like Jenny and Maddie and Leon. Specifically, we can take steps now to make sure that farmers, particularly young farmers, can still access the land at affordable prices. The wonderful news here is that things like conservation easements that we worked on, so many of us in the Farm Bill, can help keep the price of land down while preserving open spaces. We should do more of that. We should also look seriously at forgiving student loan debt for young farmers who want to stay on the land and run family farms. Student loan debt is at the heart of stopping so many young people from pursuing their dreams. And we should look at that. There was a time in this country, particularly during the Second World War, where we viewed the production of agriculture as an essential national security issue. We can invest in our young farmers by helping them spread out or ease their student loan debt, particularly if they want to use that knowledge on the farm, where more education is more important than ever before. And we can partner with organizations to provide beginning farmers with training they need, because so much of the processes are now high-tech. And we can, of course, invest in developing local food infrastructure, like better distribution centers. And we can do innovative things, like allowing people who are using the SNAP program to access green markets using certain types of technologies so that they can have both better foods and support locally sourced agriculture, the way we now do in New York City, which helps my region and helps the folks who are on nutrition assistance. So I look forward to working with my colleagues and with you, Mr. Whip, in the House to help those like Maddie and Leon and Jenny achieve their dream of owning and operating a family farm, to create a better way of life for them, for their families, while growing the economy both locally and nationally. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Maloney. Mr. Connolly.
Thank you, Mr. Hoyer, and thank you for bringing us together and forcing us to think through the future, not the past. It seems to me that we need to be debating the America of the future, not focused on the grievances of the past, but focused on the growth we need to see for the future. And the good news is the United States is incredibly well positioned to exploit comparative advantage and to compete with the best and prevail. But if we're going to do that, we've got to focus on the high-tech and innovation economy. We've got to focus on energy and especially clean energy prospects. Those are areas where we have decisive comparative advantages. But if we're going to realize our future, whether it be in agriculture, advanced manufacturing, or development of software and other kinds of technology, we need to invest in a three-legged stool. And it's always been true. And it's always made America great. You invest in research and development. You invest in education. And you invest in infrastructure. That's the agenda of the future. That undergirds our ability to compete and prevail. And right now, tragically, our country, Mr. Hoyer, is actually disinvesting in all three. We just passed, sadly, without our support, an education bill that retreats from education. We had an energy bill that gutted funding for the advanced energy research projects, a promising R&D arm that has produced for America. We need to be talking about the return on investment. Mr. Lewis mentioned the interstate highway system. It was an idea of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, but it was helped executed by a Republican, Dwight D. Eisenhower. What do you think the return has been on that investment of 60-plus years ago, and it's still giving? The Internet was entirely a federal R&D project known as DARPANet. It took the private sector's genius to figure out the commercial applicability, but when they did, when the two married, because of that federal R&D, we changed the world. Everything changed. Everything, in every corner of the world, because of that federal R&D investment. Throughout our history, wise leaders understood, from Washington to Henry Clay, to Lincoln, to FDR, to Dwight D. Eisenhower, that if you don't make these three investments, these three areas of investments, you cannot be a great country. And if we continue to disinvest and to retreat, we are handing over our future to somebody else. And they are making those investments we're not making. So I hope, Mr. Hoyer, not only that these sessions give us the opportunity to think through carefully the challenges of the future and how we might meet them, but I even hope it seeps over into the other side of the aisle and gets them to reflect and think about the legislation they've been propounding that unfortunately disserves America and makes it harder to make it in America. Thank you for your leadership.
Thank you very much for your testimony. I have been so frustrated, as I think most of us have been, because nothing that has been discussed today is partisan. I tell people I can go to the most conservative district in America and talk about making it in America, expanding manufacturing, creating opportunity. And I can go to the most liberal district and talk about that subject. And I will get the same response in both venues, agreement, shaking their head. And that is why I believe this agenda is a consensus-seeking and making agenda. And I thank you for your observation. And we saved the best for last. One of our newer members, but former state senator and very, very involved in Make It in America issues, Norma Torres of California. Norma, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Hoyer, for chairing this today's hearing and for continuing to stress the importance of creating good-paying jobs right here at home through the Make It in America agenda. It is an honor to join you and my other colleagues here today, especially Mr. Lewis, that I adore. I represent the Inland Empire, which in addition to manufacturing is a hub for logistics and processing. As an inland port, many of the goods that that come into the ports of LA and Long Beach go through my district before being shipped to the rest of the country. Unfortunately, however, my district was also among the hardest hit in the recession. While we're certainly on the rebound, many of the jobs that have come back are lower wage, lower skill, and part-time jobs. They're not the kinds of jobs that you can raise a family on. Job creation remains at the forefront of my constituents' concerns. This is why, continuing on our meeting in the district last fall, I spent my first 120 days in office on a jobs listening tour of my district, meeting with the local economic leaders, educational professionals, employees, owners of businesses, both large and small. I wanted to hear straight from them what they thought we should do to bring jobs to our region. My findings from this tour and recommendations were detailed in a report that can be found on my website. But I can tell you that the quick and cost-efficient transport of goods requires safe and modern roads, bridges, and you can't connect people to employment centers without expanding public transportation, affordable public transportation. This requires significant long-term investment in our nation's infrastructure. Yet we're facing a $3.6 trillion funding shortfall over the next 5 years, and we are relying on short-term stopgap transportation authorization bills. There's no question Congress must do its job and pass a long-term highway trust fund authorization. But we also have to look at new innovative strategies to fill the gap. The first bill I introduced after the listening tour, the Regional Infrastructure Accelerator Act, would help us do just that. Through the creation of a multi-state organizations or regional infrastructure accelerators, my bill will connect finance and infrastructure professionals with local state governments to provide them with the technical expertise and pre-development capital needed to attract private investment to public infrastructure projects. But even if we create jobs in the U.S. and build the infrastructure to support them, we need to make sure that American workers are trained to fill them. The job opportunities between our Shores Act or Jobs Act, which also came out of what I've heard and what you heard during my listening tour, will connect educational institutions with manufacturers to train job seekers in the skills employers demand. There is already one such program at work in my district with a partnership between California Steel Industries and Chaffey College. This is a model we should grow and build upon as manufacturing jobs in the Inland Empire and across the country are bouncing back. If the recession has taught us anything, it is that in order to build a resilient economy that can withstand future economic challenges, we need a dynamic, educated workforce and a diverse local economy. Comprehensive demand-driven educational programs like those proposed in a Jobs Act will help quickly train unemployed and displaced workers to meet the needs of a changing economy. The global economy is only getting more competitive. We can't afford to take a backseat and hope things will work out for the best. Congress needs to step up and take action to spur job growth right here at home. Finding innovative ways to train American workers both in high-tech manufacturing as well as other growing fields, and to fund our nation's infrastructure, our start, and should form part of the Make It in America agenda. I thank you, Whip, for your leadership in ensuring that this conversation will continue at every level in the U.S. Capitol.
Well, thank you, Congressman, and I thank you very much for your work and the work of the panel. Ms. Custer, I believe, has a question of Ms. Napolitano.
Thank you very much, Mr. Napolitano. I appreciate it. I wanted to ask with some specificity, if you could, about the impact of infrastructure in your district, and are there particular projects or what are the infrastructure needs that could help spur this economic growth and development in manufacturing?
Thank you for the question. And there have been many major transportation projects that have long-term contracts. And the Make It America, Build in America impacted them to, like I said, we would have lost about 100,000 jobs statewide, not just in our area. So what it helps is being able to understand that these things do happen and we need to be prepared for them. Now, the ability for us to continue expanding the job market is to ensure that we train, that we educate our workforce so they can be able to step into those jobs, and working with the community colleges and universities, and making sure our veterans are trained because they bring the expertise already. So all we have to do is shift them into being able to be able to take on those jobs. What we found in many of my organizations is they're very willing to work with us, but they need to be able to understand the ramifications of the bills we pass here that will limit their ability to either continue working, to export, to be able to hire locally, because now the transportation DOT has allowed them to hire locally, which is a great boon for many of our communities. Those are all very helpful, but we need to keep asking, what else can we do to be able to help our communities, our labor market, our businesses succeed so we can begin to raise the economy in our areas and in our country?
Thank you very much. Mr. Welch has a question of Mr. Maloney.
Thank you. We're towards the end. I just want to make one comment, Stenny. I sat here for 4 panels, and this panel was fantastic, but it's amazing to me to hear our colleagues talk about all these things that are like right within reach for us to do to get this country going again. I mean, shipbuilding, get those young farmers going, focusing on infrastructure, all that all of you testified to, it's all like right there. And we've had so many of our colleagues coming in like with it's shovel ready. All these things we can do today and keep going. So just one of my emotional reactions is to be, on the one hand, renewed about the potential of what this institution can do to help America succeed, and on the other, let's get going. Let's do it.
All right.
But Mr. Maloney, I want to ask you a question, because we have a situation you described in your valley all over Vermont, and we're really trying to find ways to help those young farmers who are like renewing the whole agricultural sector, and who, I want to see if you agree with this, are providing with local beer, local spirits, cheeses, and farm-to-school products, a kind of environment where some of the tech folks see that as a real attraction to come and locate in Vermont. And if you could comment on that as to whether, in addition to the benefit of the agriculture and not having products travel 1,500 miles from farm to table, you see it as an economic development component with broader implications.
Well, thank you for the question, and I'm always eager to speak out in favor of beer. So let me start there. I've recently had the opportunity to do an event in my district with about 8 craft brewers in the Hudson Valley. New York ranks number 5th in terms of craft distilleries, brewers, but also a lot of distilleries. There's an enormous international appetite for American spirits, particularly bourbon and other types of American developed spirits. These are great industries because they tend to refurbish old warehouses in small urban areas. Those are ideal for the size and scale of what's going on. We should cut the federal excise tax on craft brewers. So anybody making under 7,000 barrels, which is 90% of these guys, should pay half or even less on the federal excise tax. That would go right to their bottom line. And I don't care who disagrees. I support good beer at fair prices, and I don't care about the politics. And if it works in Vermont, so much the better.
A man of courage and conviction always.
Here I stand, sir.
All right. Let me, Congressman Connolly, of course, my colleague, we represent the Washington Metropolitan Region together, a lot of federal employees, but I want to echo his comments. I've said this on the floor of the House. For 5 years now, we've had budgets offered which are disinvestments in our country. Disinvestments in education, disinvestments in infrastructure, disinvestment in research and development, the 3 components that one of you mentioned. You mentioned, Jerry, and I think you couldn't be more accurate. Now, the question I want to ask you, you serve on the Government Reform Committee, and you look at what we could do to make government more efficient as it relates to the private sector. Those who believe that there's not a partnership between the public and private sector have no understanding of the history of the development of our economy. Can you just briefly comment on some of the things that you think we ought to be doing in terms of the government's actions to facilitate the growth in our economy?
Thank you, Mr. Hoyer. There are, you know, where we find inefficiencies and where we find barriers for an innovative economy to move forward and succeed, we need to address those. We addressed one big inefficiency in the labor economy when we adopted healthcare reform. We're the only industrialized country in the world where actually job decisions are made often by healthcare concerns, not about the merits per se of the job involved. So that was one barrier I think we really addressed, and I think it's very important for moving forward an innovative economy. Immigration reform. It's an inefficiency. It needs to be addressed. It distorts the labor market, and you know, frankly, prevents us from accessing labor, unskilled labor to help make the service economy work on the one hand, and highly skilled labor on the other. You come here to get a PhD in the best schools in the world in terms of higher education, and we send you home. Well, what if you want to stay? What if the next Einstein, who last time I checked was not born in America, is among their number? America can be a win-win. So that's another inefficiency I think that has to be addressed. There are also other areas. You know, patent reform has to be worked out, and it's a very complex issue. But patent trolls, you know, blatant patent trolling, is a huge inefficiency that's draining off resources that ought to go into IR&D, not into litigation to protect yourself from frivolous lawsuits, but nonetheless consuming huge amounts of money. And I think the government itself, Mr. Hoyer, needs to figure out how to invest in technology and deploy it to remake itself, so that it's a better servant of the people, but it's also a lot more efficient. We just saw the cost of that inefficiency when we don't make those investments in the recent breach at OPM and the Office of Personnel Management, and it's really affecting a lot of lives you and I especially represent.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lewis, you have a question of Mr. Courtney.
Thank you, Mr. Whip. Mr. Courtney, thank you for being here with your colleagues. What are the type of skilled workers that are needed in shipbuilding and building the advanced submarines? Some time ago, I was on a ship, and I've never seen anything like it. People have to be smart and talented, brainy, to operate these unbelievable. But the captain of the ship was someone from Italy, but he was operating the ship.
Wow. Yeah. Well, that is
here in America.
And again, it's the question of the day. Again, and one point I just want to emphasize, 98% of the content on submarine production is U.S. Again, that's because of a national security issue, but again, the production now are ahead of schedule and under budget, which I think is important to note, that it's not like making in America is inefficient and sloppy. I mean, we do it when the job is there. Admiral Kevin McCoy, who was the head of NAVSEA, once said that a nuclear welder, in his opinion, has a skill set that is equivalent to a brain surgeon. I mean, this is really, it's artisan work more than sort of assembly line work, to say the least. And when Secretary Tom Perez was down to visit us a couple weeks ago, we took him to the welding apprenticeship program. One of the older welders who'd been there for 35 years, who's teaching these young folks coming in because of all the new work, said that basically it takes about 5 years to 7 years for someone to really sort of get the real hang of it. And then to really be good at it, it takes probably 15 years. And that's why the Workforce Opportunity Investment Act, which President Obama signed last fall, which is going to give employers the ability to get supportive economic assistance for training up people, is so important that we have to fully fund it. with the budget this year. And as you know, on the Appropriations Committee, they are already talking about butchering all the value of the workforce
We need to do
investment.
more. We need to be prepared to do more, spend more dollars, and do the job.
That's right, and it's, you know, as Peter said, I mean, it's within our grasp, and it would be a tragedy to squander that opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Norma, we have to, Ms. Miller has been very kind, the chair of the House Administration Committee, allowing us to use this hearing room. I served for years here on the House Administration Committee some years back, so we're going to have to conclude. But I want to express my appreciation to all of the members who participated in today's hearings and who are continuing to help shape and improve the Make It in America plan and share feedback they are receiving from constituents and businesses they have visited. This is about listening to our members, who, as I said at the beginning, have extraordinary breadth of experience and knowledge and training. If we think together and work together, we can make that progress, which is so in the reach of our grasp. So I thank the Senior Chief Deputy Whip, Mr. Lewis, for being with us today, Chief Deputy Peter Welch for being with us all today, and for Congresswoman Custer for being with us today. I want to recognize in particular Jamie Fleet. I don't know that Jamie's in the room. He's been in and out. He is the Democratic Staff Director of the House Administration Committee. Eddie Flaherty. Eddie, are you in the room? If not, thank you very much. Aislinn Sims, Tommy Sandstorm. And then lastly, I want to thank a young man who's been sitting here very quietly, who I've known since he was about that tall, and I'm referring to back here the dais, not from where you're sitting, whose grandmother was a dear, dear friend of mine and a wonderful member of the Congress. His father was a wonderful member of the Congress and served in the state police in Florida, Kendrick Meek. Kendrick, thank you for being with us. Congratulations to you. You're growing up. You're growing up. You're going to be as big as your dad. Thank you all very, very much. We can make it in America if we work together, and that's what our people want us to do. Thank you.